Arellano, and we're going to be having a really powerful conversation about the need for organizing in Texas. As you all are well aware, voter suppression has been running rampant in the Lone Star State, and that calls for organizing. We need to organize our communities like never before to really go up against this unprecedented voter suppression tactics and intimidation attempts from our state representatives. Today, we're also kicking off the road to the midterms. That 2022 elections in Texas are going to be incredibly influential. The governor's up for grabs. The lieutenant governor's seat is also up for re-election. We have so much at stake, so much on the line. And to do that work, to start to organize our communities, to build that people power, and to drive Texas forward, there's a new initiative in the Lone Star State. It's called Ground Game Texas. And this is what they're all about.
Democracy is under attack, and it's time for progressives to fight back. From the January 6th insurrection to the most conservative Texas legislative session in recent history, the right wing is doing everything they can to keep us divided and to consolidate their wealth and power.
But now it's our turn to change the game. We know the issues are on our side. No matter where we live or the color of our skin, we all want better jobs and higher wages, good health care, and a livable planet.
We want safe and reliable infrastructure, not big oil bailouts. We want justice and accountability, not oppression and impunity.
It's time for us to join together, people from all walks of life, to fight for our collective future, together. But to win on progressive issues, to win in this great big state, we need to go on offense. No more off years, no more complacency.
We need to talk to voters year-round, every month, in every city.
The greedy few might have the money and the power, but we have the people.
So powerful. I'm so excited to be joined today by two former congressional candidates, Julie Oliver and Mike Siegel. Hey folks, how's it going?
Oh, so good to see you. Thanks, Antonio, for having us.
Absolutely. I've got chills from that video because it really talks about the potential of the Lone Star State. Julie, first to you. You know, in this video, I hear you talk about going on the offense. It's time to go on the offense and go big for Texas. What does that mean for you and for Ground Game?
Well, I think what we touched on, there are no more off years. We have to be consistently reaching out to voters across every nook and cranny of the state. And I know we have a big state, but that also means that the folks who have been elected to do the work of legislating, especially safe Democrats, they need to be working to engage their constituents year round. And I'll tell you that one of the things I discovered after the 2020 election is it appears that wasn't the case with our safe congressional Democrats. And so what Mike and I've put together is a plan to go city by city throughout our state, engage and partner with communities to drive turnout on very popular issues in our state, like minimum wage increase, healthcare for everybody, legalizing marijuana. So that's what I think it looks like, organizing year round, no more off years. In fact, every election should be considered as important as a presidential election.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Let me bring Mike in on this. Mike, Julie just touched on safe seats, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. And why did those safe seats normally track low voter turnout?
Right on. Well, thank you again, Antonio, for having us. And, you know, in your intro, you talked about this gerrymandered map we're dealing with, and it's been just reinforced, this racist map that's designed to suppress the vote and political influence of Black and Latino communities in particular, but really young people as well, progressives in general. And, you know, there are many impacts of gerrymandering. You know, the biggest one is that it carves up the seats and gives a smaller, basically it gives a minority party like the Republicans a huge majority of votes by cracking and packing. You know, what they do is they break up historic Black, Latino, working class communities, and they pair us with, say, you know, these rural areas that are much more conservative. And that's one way they start power vote. Another way they do it is by packing Democrats all together so that, you know, you might have a new Austin congressional district in the next election that's going to have a 50-point advantage for Democrats. And that's good for the people who live in that district, but it means that our votes are not as distributed among the various districts. And these are the big impacts of gerrymandering. But then there's another one, and there's probably many more, but one of them is that when we're all packed together in one seat, it makes the general election, that November election, less important, really what happens is in some of these areas, the Democrat wins the nomination. And some of these are people we know and love who've been in office for many, many years. But they win that nomination likely in March of the year. But the general election's in November. And so this coming year, some of these folks are going to win their nomination. They're going to be safe. They're going to know they're returning to Congress. Then are they going to get out the vote in November to make sure, say, our statewide slate of Democrats also win? And that's one of the problems we have, is that in the safe Democratic areas, the top-ranking Democratic office holders are not spending money on turnout, which means that some of the lowest turnout congressional districts are safe seats. And in fact, Julie ran the numbers. I believe it's out of the 12 lowest turnout congressional districts. So in 2020, we had 36 congressional districts. So the bottom third, 11 out of 12 were Democratic safe seats. And that's a big problem when you're trying to win statewide. If you're not getting out the vote in every single area, that hurts everybody's up and down the ticket.
Yeah, right. That's the power of the incumbency, right? That a lot of folks have the pleasure of having, but it also hurts turnout and democracy overall. And ultimately, we see that when we have low voter participation, the folks who are already in power are the folks who ultimately benefit from that. I looked quickly at the Ground Game website and was really inspired by the messaging. The messaging is $15 minimum wage, expanding Medicaid, and legalizing marijuana. Those are some of the progressive issues that Ground Game seems to be putting forward. Why is this the winning messaging, Julie?
Well, so they're really popular issues with the majority of Americans, quite frankly. This is where there's a huge disconnect between the people who've been elected to office and what they are willing to vote for and stand for, and what the people really want. There's a huge disconnect. And one of the things that we were looking at after the elections again in November of 2020 were what were the issues that really pulled people out to come vote. And in states like Texas, where we don't have a statewide ballot initiative, we have to do these ballot initiatives city by city. But in other states that do have statewide ballot initiatives, the issues that turned out voters at numbers greater than any, including Biden, any of the Democratic candidates, were minimum wage increases. We know Florida passed a statewide $15 minimum wage increase. Missouri passed Medicaid expansion. South Dakota legalized marijuana for medicinal purposes. A lot of the states, in fact, majority of the states that are surrounding Texas have decriminalized marijuana to a certain extent. And when you have something that has 91% approval rates, that'd be like marijuana decriminalization or cannabis reform. 91% of Americans think that it should be reformed. And you have a small, I call it a super minority that has been elected to state leadership, and including our current lieutenant governor, who says that marijuana decrim will never come to the Senate floor. This is where we have an opportunity to pick up votes. Popular issues that people favor, taking them directly to the people. We call it direct democracy, putting it on a ballot so that they'll turn out and vote for that issue. Along the way, if candidates want to identify that that's an issue that they support, great. Candidates can also identify that that's not an issue they support, but then a voter going to the ballot box is informed about the candidates and the issues.
Direct democracy. I love that. Bringing it right to the people and circumventing those legislators who have been stalling progress for so long. I love the emphasis on legalizing marijuana. Like you mentioned, it's widely popular. 91% of Americans in favor of reforming marijuana legalization in the United States. Texas seems like it would be uniquely positioned to capitalize on this opportunity. Mike, why have we not gotten with Willie Nelson in the bunch?
I think there's been a lot of fear on the side of Democrats as being associated with drug abuse or, stoners or, whatever have you. There's this entrenched kind of fear of embracing that issue. I mean, I'm maybe one of the older people on this call, but I remember when, Bill Clinton had to hide when he ran for president. Oh, I didn't inhale when that joint was passed to me, right? And things have changed a lot. And so now this is this opportunity where there's a wedge issue that works in our favor. And we need to use it as progressives, not even just like, being isolated to the Democratic Party. As progressives, we have to use issues that interest and excite a broader base of people so that we can win elections. We know Republicans do this. when I've made calls to pitch this kind of concept of workers, wages, and weed, which is how Julie and I have been messaging this. Let's get jobs programs, let's raise wages, and then let's legalize marijuana. Some people are like, wow, that's genius. That's kind of like what George Bush did. And some of you may remember when George W. ran for president, Karl Rove, his mad genius campaign manager, put defending gay marriage, basically defending traditional marriage, anti-gay marriage measures on 11 state ballots. And they used that to elect George Bush to the presidency. Republicans know that with their wedge issues, and they've got these issues like abortion and Second Amendment rights, which are not necessarily hugely popular, but they're powerful with their base. They use those to get people excited. And so why don't we use our wedge issues to get people excited? And this could be marijuana reform or other issues. We can't be too narrowly calibrated. One of the big critiques, Antonio, of progressives in the last election, there was all this focus on this extremely narrow healthcare issue, protecting or preserving protections for pre-existing conditions, right? Like we all learned that, that's extremely popular. Everyone wants to be protected if you have a pre-existing condition. But it's such a narrow issue in this larger conversation about guaranteeing healthcare for everyone. It doesn't address old people. It doesn't address people without healthcare at all. And so we can't be pigeonholed into these tiny issues. We need to get the big popular issues. And we think marijuana reform is one of these things that it gets people's attention. I mean, we've already found that in terms of who signs our petition to decriminalize marijuana in Austin, young people sign it. Infrequent voters sign it. Black and brown folks sign it. Folks who don't vote as frequently, especially in municipal races, are signing these issues. And we think that we can get them engaged in the broader political process, using marijuana as a gateway issue of sorts into politics.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think that, into your latter point, early on, you mentioned how these are just the messaging that's becoming out against, progressive issues or marijuana legalization to try to criminalize folks, to try to intimidate folks into seeing this as a problem and not as a potential solution. I want to bring you to a national conversation that's being had about Texas in terms of the governor's race. And folks really trying to find out, where is the electorate overall? Is it extremely to the right? Is it extremely to the left? Is it somewhere in the middle? In a recent podcast interview, Matthew McConaughey, one of the candidates that potentially could run, said that Texas voters are fed up with the right and fed up with the left, that they're with the armadillos in the middle of the road. Do you agree? Or is there a progressive momentum happening in Texas?
I believe there's a progressive momentum happening in Texas, and that we aren't enticing people to vote. I want to remind people that in November of 2020, 5.6 million registered Texans did not show up to vote. Another 2 million eligible Texans didn't get registered to vote. Those are game-changing numbers for elections. The fact that you even had just 5.6 million folks who didn't vote, we were just shy of 12 million votes in the November 2020 election. That really sways things and changes things. But if you don't have issues on the ballot that attract attention, or candidates that are supporting very, very popular issues and are very clear in their messaging about that, then people are going to stay home. And I think one of the clearest indications of that, if you look in the primary, the Democratic presidential primary in South Texas, overwhelmingly voted for Bernie Sanders. And come general election time, it appeared, there was gaining momentum for Trump. So we need to give people something exciting to vote for. And we believe that these issues, and if candidates will message, just for a moment, I think that one of the failures of the Democratic Party is the wonkiness of messaging, and that it's not clear and succinct. Mike pointed out perfectly that preserving protections for pre-existing conditions is not only a tongue twister, it's, it focuses on such a narrow group of people who already have health insurance. When senior citizens have Medicare, there's no such thing as pre-existing condition, and folks who are either uninsured or underinsured, it doesn't matter whether their insurance covers pre-existing conditions or not. We need to give people a real meal when it comes to these are the things that we stand for. And I do believe Texas is the place where we can launch progressive issues and get people to vote on them.
And if I could build on that,
I absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, I think this, Rio Grande Valley question is essential to this, because, You know, I don't know if you follow Chuck Rocha, who's this kind of national leader,
Yeah, of course.
polling a lot of issues. You know, Chuck, I really like him, and he did some polls after 2020 in the Valley, and what he found was that actually Trump's gaining popularity down there was connected to what we would consider to be a progressive issue, because what Trump did is he sent everyone a $1,200 check, and we know he didn't give people what they really needed during the pandemic, but he sent everyone a $1,200 check. He put his name on the check, and he made sure everyone knew that he had sent them that check. And what Chuck Rocha found was that one little stimulus check that Trump sent down there had a big influence on people associating him with something that materially benefited their lives. And that's where, as Democrats, it's not enough to be correct. It's not enough to be politically correct or woke, and I don't love how that term is used by the right wing, but it's not enough just to signal that we're the good guys. We have to deliver. And so to me, this connects to the conversations that are happening in Congress right now about the infrastructure bill. Democrats, while Biden is in there, need to deliver material gains to people, wages, jobs, healthcare, the actual things that make your lives better. And to the extent we can become associated with those wins, then that's going to make, you know, long-term gains for our movement.
Absolutely. No, you're right. And in terms of that Rio Grande Valley perspective and conversation that happened right after the last election, you know, I think that it's absolutely crucial that we do tap into the economic pain of that constituency. Just for example, at February 2020, the unemployment rate in the Rio Grande Valley was right around 6%. A couple of months later, in May, it was at 17%, well over the 13% state average, which means that the Latinos, Hispanic community in the Rio Grande Valley were losing their jobs, were losing their homes, being evicted in the middle of a pandemic. When you saw two messages coming out of the two leading parties in the country, the Republican Party's messaging was, we're going to get you back to work, get your kids back in school, put money in your pockets, food on your table. And the Democratic message was, stay home, wear a mask, which is great advice in terms of healthcare, protection, but it's bad advice and bad messaging when people are losing their homes, losing their jobs, and need an incentive, need a spark of hope that things will be resolved. I think that the lack of awareness of that economic pain in that constituency definitely played a role there. And I want to talk to you about the courage to run on those issues. You talk about how progressive messaging is polling well in the state, and how you see particularly young voters gravitating to it. I think both you, Mike, and Julie ran really inspirational congressional campaigns that let people see themselves reflected in those races. But not everybody gets the chance to do that. We have candidates that are not inspiring young and diverse, multilingual, multicultural generations. How do we build that pipeline of courage to drive forward transformative change through meaningful candidacy in the state of Texas?
Well, right on. Well, I'll start and then pass it to Julie. I mean, I think it does need to be this pipeline, like you say. And so one issue I'm interested in, right, is the schools. I mean, a lot of the fights that are happening right now, the culture war fights, are at the school board level, right? Suddenly wearing a mask and protecting your neighbors is a politicized issue. Suddenly having accurate and diverse curriculum is a political issue. You know, they want to call it critical race theory. Let's learn about racism in this country. You know, that's not critical race theory. That's history. You know, it's like it's the facts. And suddenly, you know, teaching about equity and inclusion in our schools has become politicized. And so, really, I think long term, I mean, I think as younger people, and on this call, we can all identify as being younger. We need to have a longer term horizon. It's not just about 2022, right? The Republicans have building for this moment when they can gerrymander the map and control the Supreme Court. They built for decades, and we need a similar long-term commitment. And so ideally right now, for any of you watching who you might yourself as progressive or have progressive friends or associates in the community, they should be running for school board next year, because we want to be building that pipeline all the way up. Now, of course, right now we're concerned about who our next governor is. It'd be great to have a progressive governor. But some of these decisions are set years in advance, and we're not going to be ready for 2028. I don't know if any of y'all want to elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as president, you know, something like that. But if we want to get ready for that moment, we have to be building now. And that means people running for good office from the bottom of the ticket on up.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that when I ran, I was intentional in going to meet young people where they were and speaking to them and encouraging them to run. And I do think there are so many. I am so impressed with the level of engagement that the folks that I'm meeting who are in college or recently, out of college, or those years between 18 and 25, the level of engagement, the level of knowledge that they have, and the level of awareness about what their future looks like. Goodness gracious, I was probably happily oblivious to what the future was going to look like for me. But this is a future where we might not have a planet that can support people across, industries, and where the earth may not even produce the food that we need to require sustenance. And if you're talking about kids who want the hope of going to college, but not coming out with a mortgage payment on the other side and paying for that for the next 30 years. We need to ensure that college education is part of that. We need to make sure that we are moving quickly and dramatically to a renewable energy economy. We need to ensure that women's healthcare rights are protected, constitutionally protected. There are so many things. And I do think that young people are paying attention right now. And I think that when you come from a history of disadvantage, maybe a lower socioeconomic stance, for me, I was young and a parent by the time I was 17, so I certainly was not thinking about running for any office at that age. It may seem like those doors are closed and those opportunities don't present themselves, but I think those are the people we need to be electing, because they have very lived experience. They know what it's like to struggle. They know the hurt and the pain. They know what it's like to oh my gosh, I don't know if I can make rent next month. Am I going to be evicted? I don't have the privilege of staying home with a mask on because I've got to feed kids and keep the lights on. And so what other alternative is there? That's a privilege to be able to stay and work from home, but I don't have that privilege. And so we need to be encouraging folks who have those lived experiences to run for offices in their communities, and whether that's school board, city council. I mean, I think over this last year, we realized how important those local offices are, whether it's school board and providing the correct curriculum to teach the next generation of leaders, whether it's city council. City council has a huge say in local housing and whether it's going to be affordable or not affordable. They have a huge say in whether areas get gentrified, whether it's county. And, in Texas, healthcare, especially healthcare for poorer communities, are paid for by county funds. We need folks who are running for those offices to have a say in those decisions that represent the majority of us.
Yeah, absolutely. On your website, groundgametexas.org, you mentioned Arizona and you mentioned Georgia's victories as possible in Texas, and that it's really inevitable, right? But what we've seen in Arizona and in Georgia, we saw a massive investment to communities of color, particularly Latinos in Arizona and the Black community in Georgia. Texas now shows that its population growth was led by 95% of it by people of color. What is Ground Game doing to make sure that we are reaching and connecting with the diversification of our population here in Texas?
No, that's right, Antonio. I mean, I think big picture, Julie and I, being two white people, are very conscious that we want to use the kind of status we've achieved as candidates to funnel money into the communities the most needed. And you hit the nail on the head. We need to be organizing in the communities where the growth is occurring that are getting the least representation under the Republican map. And unfortunately, we're going to have to take a step back because the Supreme Court's not going to save us. The federal judiciary is not going to save us. These maps are most likely going to be crammed down, and they're going to hurt us right now. But in the years ahead, we need to be organizing community by community and investing in these different cities where the vote is most suppressed. And so an example for that is Killeen, Texas, a community that's 40% African-American. It's in the shadow of Fort Hood, a couple hours north of Austin. And the most current map splits Killeen in half, splits the Black community of Killeen in half, so that they're going to be almost voiceless in the state legislature. And so that's where we need to invest. We need to make sure that folks in Killeen know that their vote is precious. Actually, they are the target of the Republican Party because that's how important the Black community in Killeen is. And so what Julie and I want to do is bring investment into Killeen. We want to put ballot measures there that help get people excited about elections so that people don't feel like their vote is futile. Because one of the most damaging aspects of gerrymandering is that it makes you feel like your vote is worthless, right? They've already rigged the game, and so my vote doesn't matter. And we want to give people a reason to vote that makes a difference in their lives. And then over time, if people develop the habit of voting, we add up Killeen, and we organize in Mission, and we organize in El Paso and Houston, all these other cities, and every vote counts. We really truly treat every person's vote as precious and valuable. That's how we ultimately win. Because you use that word inevitable, Antonio, and there's that idea that Democrats have had in Texas. Demographics is destiny, and it's not exactly true, right? Because the Republicans are fighting tooth and nail for every moderate Hispanic vote they can get right now. They're spending millions upon millions of dollars reaching out to this growing constituency, and Democrats have to earn that vote. They have to prove that they're worthy of that vote, and hopefully what we're doing is contributing to the constellation of organizations where it's Texas Organizing Project, Jolt Action, Workers Defense Project, and others. Hopefully we're adding some additional resources to bring into this long-term fight to take back Texas.
Fantastic. And you're absolutely right. Population alone, the diversification of our population is not the solution, right? We've got to engage, we've got to connect, we've got to understand this constituency. Julie, same question to you. What lessons are we learning from Arizona and Georgia and applying in Texas?
Well, I think also I think one thing, let me just say this, step back a second. I don't think the infrastructure has been built in Texas. We're only at the infancy. So I think this is a long-term project. Hopefully we'll see some gains in 2022, hopefully a few more gains in 2024, hopefully a few more gains, but this is a long game. And I think I want to remind people that this is not a quick fix. What has happened in Arizona and Georgia has been years in the work, and it's been very intentional. So I want viewers to understand that this is a long game, and we have to go with intention into every one of these communities. But I also want to let people know that Mike and I can't step into many of these communities and do the work. So what we are doing is we're partnering with communities already on the ground there, like in Killeen, partnering with the Killeen NAACP and, Move Killeen, which is a local organizing activist group there. We have to have partners on the ground in every one of the communities that we go into. We're not just going to step into a community uninvited and think, oh, we could come in and get everybody out in your city to vote. No, we have to be intentional. And I do believe it's going to take, every organization in Texas doing this work. And that is why I'm incredibly proud to be supporting the work of like a Texas Organizing Project or Jolt or Workers Defense, and finding the communities, because this is a huge state, finding the communities that don't have that infrastructure and building there, like in Killeen. And ultimately, like we're going to go at some point in the future to DeSoto and Duncanville, Texas, places where I probably spent a little too much of my youth cruising down streets in my little car. But this is a sort of infrastructure and organizing that we need in our state, and it will be truly all hands on deck to get there.
All hands on deck, and the road to the midterms starts now. I want to thank both of you for joining me today. And if anybody wants to get involved with Ground Game Texas, you absolutely should. You can go to groundgametexas.org to find out more about the organization, register to volunteer, attend one of their events, or just fill out join their newsletter to keep up with them. I think that it's imperative that we all get engaged. The road to the midterm starts now, but it's going to be a long road ahead and an uphill battle. Texas has the potential to transform the United States. Now with 40 electoral votes, the second biggest prize on election night, there's absolutely no reason why Texas should not be at the forefront of politics. And like always, I want to thank you for joining us. Later on in the week, we will be talking to Representative Ron Reynolds and Representative Crockett, about the power of progressive power building in Texas, and excited for that conversation. I hope you will join us. Julie, Mike, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.